Hello and welcome to our complimentary webinar, which is brought to you today in partnership with Inspiro, and it's entitled The Heart and Mind of a Winning CX Culture. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's many special guests, we hope to spark your interest and engage you in the conversation, as well as provide some ideas to take back to your respective businesses. To round off the session, we'll be having a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but you need to hang around and you need to ask a question because we are giving away signed copies of our very special keynotes book as part of that Q&A session. I'm Fiona Keogh and I'm CEO of Auscontact, and I'll be your moderator for today. While we're waiting for everyone to join, let's use the time to run through some housekeeping. Remember, it's important to interact to maximise the benefit. And as you know, there's no need to take too many notes because we'll be providing you with a recording of the webinar. To interact with us, please use the Q&A button on the control panel. Or if you're having difficulty with your headset or with your internet connections, you can always raise your hand. But don't forget that Q&A button is going to be your key to maybe getting one of those 20 books from our very special keynote. If you're also having trouble, the other easy way to get back into the webinar is to go back to your original email, and there is a telephone number and access codes in that email. So I know you all know how to ask questions, but do you know how to use the Q&A button on the control panel? Possibly not. So let's try it out. Today's question, and as you guys probably know, I don't ask difficult questions, but today's might be a bit tricky. Which Australian state border is the last to open in time for the holiday season? Now, I'm sure many of you know the answer to that. Oh, Tara got it in one. They come a long way back in the alphabet, which is probably why they're last to open their borders to the rest of Australia. I don't know if it's done in alphabetical order. Yep, Bron knows. Yeah, well done. Emma knows. Yeah, you guys all know. I'm not going to keep you in suspenders any longer. It's Western Australia, and we're so glad because it is a beautiful, beautiful state. So as we move through, let me introduce a wonderful, wonderful individual who is in Australia and is the country head and vice president for Australia and New Zealand of Inspiro, Vibhav Sharma. Maybe after you learn so much today, you're going to be cracking your neck to get in contact with Vibhav to find out more about Inspiro. And we wanted to put a face to a name. And he's a veteran in the outsourcing industry of more than 20 years experience and been part of large BPO programs for 2 of the big 4 banks. And we'll let you know his details towards the end of the webinar. So I now have further pleasure in introducing our massive panel of fabulous industry speakers. Firstly, I would like to introduce Jaquie Scammell, who may be familiar with many of you, but I'll let Jaquie tell you more about herself. Claire Williams, who is the Executive General Manager at Netregistry Group, Think Domains, for one. Ray Rivadelo, who is Vice President and Head of Enterprise Customer Experience and Care at PLDT Enterprise. Plus, we have a few more from Inspiro. We have Rysel Muddy and Ali Antonio. And now, without further ado, it's over to our keynote, Jaquie Scammell. Welcome, Jaquie.
Thank you, Fiona. It is great to be here, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with us today with all of you about service in the new world and what this idea of bringing heart to service is all about. And I just want to acknowledge all of you who have turned up today. You know, it takes a special kind of person to invest in some learning and spend some time thinking about how we can be better. And I think that one of the most difficult service environments is a call center, a customer contact center. And we're going to go through a few reasons why I think that be the case. Hasn't it been a strange year? You know, to steal a phrase, They say that there's decades where nothing happens, and then there's weeks where decades happen. And isn't it true that that's what 2020 has been like for all of us, no matter where you are in the world, really? You know, we've seen the innovations, we've seen the online businesses that have just come out from nowhere. We've seen the mass mobilization of people working from home, remote working from home. And then the social behaviors that we've had to adapt. We know the self-isolation, the mask wearing, social distancing. And then what about the financial impact that many people have experienced and perhaps yet to experience? And I wonder, with all this change in the world, does that mean that we need to radically change the way we serve people? Or is it sort of less complicated than that? You see, there was a report that came out just recently from KPMG, just last month actually, a global report about creating customer excellence. And what they said was that all of us busy people that work as professional services in whatever we do and whatever roles we're in, we've got 3 challenges at the moment with our customers. The first challenge is that we need to create this continuity of experience during a time of uncertainty. The second challenge is we've got to build certainty while things keep changing. And then the third challenge is that we've got to redefine normal in our businesses. So in other words, our customers are a little bit scared, they're looking for easy solutions, and they want to do business with brands and businesses that they trust, that they're confident in. And so I'm interested in having a conversation with you all today about what's been an impact for you this year? How has it impacted you and your customers? And more importantly, what are some of your thoughts, your beliefs, your mindsets even that drives our behavior when we serve people, whether it's on the phone, via email, even, you know, face-to-face with our internal customers. And I think that maybe the world has changed, but one thing I know for sure is that service is human, and it always has been. It requires a balance of head and heart. You see, when we make decisions, us humans, we typically weigh up 2 things. We weigh up the facts, the data, the evidence of a situation, but we also bring an emotional filter to our decisions. So people who do service best, what typically they do is they weigh up the rules and the values. They apply the whole decision is not just based on logic, but it's based on emotional intelligence, intuition, maybe even a good dose of common sense. You see, those of us that bring skills of the heart to a conversation, what we're really doing is we're meeting people where they're at. And there was a fantastic author by the name of Dale Carnegie. He wrote the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And what he says in this book is that we've got to remember when we're dealing with people, we're actually not dealing with logic. We're dealing with creatures of emotions. And emotions are irrational. Emotions sometimes come out of nowhere like big dust clouds. Emotions don't have brains. So what we need to remember is that when we're dealing with people in service, we're actually dealing with emotions. And dealing with emotions is a little bit tricky. So one of the things that I really encourage us to think about when it comes to these skills of the heart is that this is a conversation that's not going to go away. There was a report from Deloitte last year that came out that talked about the skills gap for the future of work, particularly here in Australia. And I think it's relevant for all of us. What they said is that there is a multi-million-dollar gap, a $5.5 million gap actually, with people who have these skills of the heart. These skills of the heart are things like good decision-making, problem solving, empathy, asking great questions, good judgment. And that $5.5 million gap is what represents people who have those skills today and how many we need to have those skills by 2030. So we've got a little bit of a way to go here in Australia, and I don't think this conversation is going to go away. So what does it look like? What do these skills of the heart look like when they're in motion, shall we say? So I want to share with you a story that maybe hopefully one you're all familiar with. And it's a story of buying a good cup of coffee. Let's start there with something simple. Hopefully you all relate to this. So I live in an apartment in Melbourne. 4 blocks from that apartment is my favorite cafe. And to get to my favorite cafe, I have to walk past 7 other cafes. I'm going there for less about the coffee and more about the conversation. But don't get me wrong, the coffee needs to be good, right? It's my birth-given right to have good coffee in this city. But what happens when I walk into this cafe is the staff literally, it's like a CRM database, just gets downloaded in their brain the second they see my face. They remember my name, they remember my order, and they make me feel important no matter how busy they are. And it's that last point that I just want to hone in on a little bit. You see, the essence of service, no matter whether you're on the phone, via email, face-to-face, the essence of service is to make people feel seen, feel heard, and feel that they matter, feel that they're understood. Maya Angelou, she said it best. She said that every single one of us, we share the same desire, anyone that we interact with, and that is, do you see me? Do you hear me? And does what I say mean anything to you? So this cafe that I go to, I'm not buying coffee. I'm buying connection. So think about your work, your role, the customers that you serve. What are your customers really buying? Sure, there's a brand, there's a product, there's a service, and what else? You see, our job in service is to provide solutions and connections. And this is when we bring head and heart to a conversation. So there's something I want to introduce to you, which is a term, and that term is called emotional labor. What we've got to remember is that in service, particularly in an environment like yours, you're doing the heavy lifting of emotional labor. You're not doing the physical work like a bricklayer laying bricks. You're doing the emotional labor. And like we say, that stuff's tricky because humans are unpredictable. And don't forget, any of us can have a bad day, right? And it only takes one employee in your team to have a bad day. And like it or not, how a customer feels about an interaction with one employee is how a customer feels about the brand itself. And so there's an element of emotional connection that's created by how we respond to people's emotions. And I'm sure all of you have got a story of some cracker experiences where customers have brought all of their full emotions to a conversation. Let me tell you a quick story about a time that I had to really learn this idea of emotional labor. Many years ago, in fact, 2005, I was sent over to England to mobilise Wembley National Stadium. This is a massive stadium. We had about 2,500 staff just in my area. I was in charge of the corporate hospitality and suites. So my customers, they were duchesses and dukes, high-flying millionaires, global celebrities. You can imagine high maintenance type customers, right? Like I'd never felt more pressure than I had in my career during these years. And they had world-class expectations. And I'm sure if you think about your types of customers, each of them, you know, they've got a different sort of style and demographic. But what happened was we were given a training budget like most businesses, and I had to be really savvy with what I did with that training budget. You know, I needed a room. I needed a team who could read a room. I needed a team who could read a situation and adjust their service depending on whether they were serving a duchess and duke or a dad who was there with his kid to watch a game of footy. And these skills were skills that I would call of the emotional labor. Skills of the heart, not necessarily the technical stuff, but the common sense stuff. And so when I practice this emotional fitness, what I realized is that there's actually only one rule when it comes to service. And throughout my career now, when I work with different industries and different sectors, this rule applies across every type of business. And that rule is to use good judgment in any situation that's critical to the customer. So how do you do that? How do you use good judgment? How do you get your teams to use good judgment? Well, let me give you a quick call center scenario where we can see this play out in real life. So we're in a busy call center. There's an employee called Sal. Now, Sal, he's got a really angry customer on the end of the phone. He's got a script in front of him, and that script has got some preferred answers to some common questions or challenges. He reads the response from the script and realizes that he can't solve the problem. So he quickly escalates the call and handballs the customer to another employee. The customer stays on the line and gets transferred somewhere else and stays online for several more minutes, all the while their frustration building. Meet Larry. Larry, on the other hand, is in that same call center. He's got another angry customer on the end of the phone. He's got that same script in front of him with those sort of preferred answers to the common questions. But Larry quickly realizes that he isn't going to apply a solution that's written down on a standard response. This situation is going to require something different. So Larry takes ownership. And instead of handballing the customer to somebody else, he quickly drops a note in the chat box to the rest of the team to see if they've dealt with the same situation before. And lo and behold, Gloria has. She comes over and she takes Larry through the process that she's dealt with before. Happy customer. Same scenario, different approach, because what Larry did was he asked questions, he applied empathy, and there was a good dose of common sense. And I think this is the key to service. The skill that I would say we all need to develop in relationships, in business, because if you're in this business of service, you're in the business of relationships, right? And that skill is social intelligence. Social intelligence is the ability to get others to cooperate with you, get them to go along with you, which is kind of helpful in a service role, don't you think? I like to think of it like adjusting the lens of a camera. You know, we know when we need to zoom in on something and when we need to sort of back it up. We don't just point and shoot if we want a quality picture. We know what to look for and how to adapt to get the best quality image. So social intelligence is definitely a skill that I would encourage everyone to think about in an environment like yours. But there is a skill that trumps this. In fact, it's probably the most important skill in service, and it's in every one of us that's sitting here today on this webinar. But it's also the first skill to go the moment we're busy, stressed, or tired. And that's the skill of paying attention. You see, service is an attention challenge. It's not a set of procedures. You think about it. Have you ever been introduced to someone who they've told you their name and then moments, sometimes seconds later, you actually forget their name? Yeah. I've been in workshops where many people share this with me and they say, Jackie, I'm not good at remembering people's names. And my response is, get good. Because remembering people's names is not a memory problem. It's an attention problem. You see, we've got a lot going on. We're sitting in front of screens all day. Some of us are serving tens, hundreds and hundreds of customers in a day. Some of us are just going flat stick for hours in this busy world that we live in. And there's two things that happen that get in the way of us paying attention. The first is that we get distracted. Now, a distraction could be as simple as a crying baby in the background on a phone call, someone speaking too loudly on their phone, or maybe the guy behind you that sneezes and you think, oh my God, have they got coronavirus? And what happens is these distractions, they take us away from the now. They take us away from our mental train of thought. They take us away from the problem solving. They take us away from the conversation. You know, I researched this. And it says, the studies say that we get interrupted every 11 minutes of the day. You see, your day is just one big giant continuum of distractions. That's every 11 minutes you're being taken away from the now, which means you've definitely been distracted during this call already. So I'm wondering, how do we avoid the distractions? But I mentioned there was two barriers to paying attention. And the second barrier is that we're exhausted. We live in a modern day world that requires us to do things that we're not wired to do. We're not wired to sit in front of screens all day. We're not wired to be on the phone all day. We're not wired to sit all day. And yet the modern day world has created an environment where this is what we do. And so how do we emotionally recharge and refuel throughout a day? How do we rest our thinking mind? You know, Stanford University said that we've got 60,000 thoughts running through our mind every day. 60,000 thoughts. How do you rest your mind and make sure you're not stuck in your head and paying attention to the person that you're speaking with? So our nervous system is under stress, which means you and your customers are stressed out. So paying attention, this is the essence of service. What do you do with your teams? What do you do for yourself to stay mindful and stay in the moment? Because my fundamental belief is that, you know, we all have the capability to serve, to care, to deliver exceptional service. It's just that sometimes we forget. And I think it's not a question of capability, but rather a question of how present are you really? And so those who are extraordinarily present deliver extraordinary service. And what I want to do to wrap up today's conversation is share with you three key points. Firstly, remember that serving is a matter of balancing your head and your heart. We've got to bring all of us to a conversation, not just here. Secondly, practicing this emotional fitness, the social intelligence skills, is critical to strong relationships, strengthening relationships. And thirdly, how do you practice staying present and mindful throughout all the cracks of the day, so the person that you serve at the end of the day gets the same energy and enthusiasm that the first person you served at the beginning of the day does? Now, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you a bit later, some Q&A, but for now, I'll pause and I'll throw back to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks so much. I'm leaning into this conversation, I can tell you. So now we're going to get you guys to get your hands on the keyboard and answer what we call a double bunger poll, because there are two questions and I'm not going to read the whole lot. Poll number one: what are the top 2 metrics you use or would like to use to evaluate customer experience? Only choose 2. And the second question is: what are the key challenges within your organisation to achieving those 2 metrics to drive best-in-class customer experience? Please choose your top 2. So, Jackie, you've just inspired us about how to go about this, but what are you actually seeing around the metrics and challenges?
I find, Fiona, that, you know, our society and the workplace, we've often just focused on the hard metrics, you know, CSAT scores and, you know, NPS and, you know, even sales times, response times, but it's the soft measures that I'm really interested in measuring, and it's those soft measures of the heart, and lots of different ways of doing it. But I think there's a connection, Fiona, with how do we measure that our values in an organisation are being lived and being felt? Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I think we've got enough people having answered the polls, Jess. So if you wouldn't mind sharing what we're seeing. Okay. So to question 1, the top 2 metrics, the number 1 metric by a whisker has been Net Promoter or CSAT scores, with a couple at customer journey analytics and first contact resolution rate. And on the second poll question, wow, there's a couple of 2 very close together metrics that drive best-in-class CX from this audience, is the lack of holistic CX strategy and technology limitations. Wow. Okay, well, that is really interesting and certainly gives us some food for thought. Clearly, this audience is the right audience for this webinar today. So I'm going to now hand over to Rivadelo from Inspiro. Over to you, Rivadelo. Okay, so if we can get Ali to just jump in and do his session. Sorry, that was without notification. We'll get those slides to where we need to go to until Rivadelo is able to rejoin us.
Sure. Thank you, Fiona. You know, later on in a bit, Rizel's going to talk about what we call malasakit. It's a Filipino value that has no direct translation in the English language. You know, the best translation I can think of is genuine care. So she's going to talk about malasakit in reference to employees. But I want to talk about malasakit for customers. You know, as they say, CX is a team effort. It's a collaborative activity with the clients and the outsourcing partner. Because really, We are extensions of the brand. The end result of this is a collaborative and synergistic process that can result in benefits for the customer, like improved resource management, efficiency, deep industry experience, optimizing costs, and ultimately better customer service. Next slide, please. So whether you're new to outsourcing or experienced in this field, finding the right partner is key. Part of it is finding a partner with referenceable experience in the industry, whether it's banking, retail, media, someone with experience in CX plus technology, and someone who can scale up or even down easily depending on the season. As I mentioned earlier, collaboration too is very critical. In Inspiro, we would start off any implementation with a tiger team that will handhold the customer as we go through the CX journey together. This team is made up of leaders and reps, experts in their chosen field with multiple years of experience in the industry or vertical that we're about to support. You also need a partner that shares your corporate values, whether it's agility, innovation, people management. It's very important that you find this partner because ultimately that too resonates in the customer experience. And to me, Jaquie put it best earlier. You're not buying service, you're buying a connection. Next slide, please. Lastly, a true vendor-client relationship goes beyond managed services. A true partner enables you to grow the business. I'll cite a few examples. With Dish Network, we started out with them with 50 FTEs, and this was 19 years ago. In fact, I was part of that first group of 50 agents taking calls straight out of college. Now, we've got 2,000 employees supporting the entire customer lifecycle. With another client, 1-800-Flowers, I remember when ramps were less than 500 people. Now, 4 times during the year, we do ramps as many as, we go from 50 to 2,000 people. And on top of that, we've been continuously awarded as Vendor of the Year. And the same story with PLDT, and I'm sure Ray will talk about it in a bit. Talking about contributions to achieving key milestones for the business, we also play instrumental roles in customers winning industry awards like the JD Powers for Dish, Stevie Awards for Outstanding Sales for one of our key clients, 1-800-Flowers. I think lastly and most importantly, as we reference CX resiliency, a partner's capability and mindset are critical, especially with the uncertainty we face globally. I'm pleased to announce, despite the Philippines, a country where you find many of Inspiro's delivery locations having the longest lockdown restrictions globally, we continue to provide services through our hybrid model of both on-site and work-from-home teams to our customers. In fact, our work-from-home numbers are comparable, sometimes even better than their on-site counterparts. To cite an example, remote VOC resolution scores are at par with their on-site counterparts. This goes back, I think, to Malasakit in action, genuine care for our customers. That's it for me. Let me pass it on back to Fiona.
Thanks, Ali. I think Roselle is back with us.
Hi, sorry about that. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for joining us here today. I'm Roselle Matty, and I currently oversee the service delivery of our programs for Asia Pacific region. So for the next few minutes, I will briefly talk about how great employee experience can drive great customer experience. And there are many companies around the world who believe in the same philosophy, such as Zappos and Starbucks. For Zappos, they ultimately believe that happy employees lead to happy customers. And here at Inspiro, we believe in the same thing. We take care of our people like family, and in turn, our people take care of our customers. So the philosophy is hinged on one of our core values. Next slide, please. And this is called malasakit. It's a Filipino word with no direct translation, and it denotes genuine care and concern for another person's well-being. So with the philosophy plus the core value malasakit, what makes for a great employee experience here in our organization? Of course, compensation and benefits will always make up a significant part of the overall employee satisfaction. But surely money isn't everything, and there are intangibles that influence attrition. So if we can go to the next slide. We held FGDs across different programs just to understand what makes our agents or reps stay here at Inspiro. And they gave 3 intangibles. The first of which is that they feel empowered. Agents experience a higher level of fulfillment if they are empowered, and if they have a supportive manager and supervisor, then that person can guide the agent to determine as to when they need to make a deviation. So an example would be, we had a call several months back where a customer could not make his payment because of problems brought about by the bushfires in Australia. So he was asking for a 30-day extension. And given the situation, the agent felt that this warranted a deviation. So the agent went out of his way to ask the supervisor and manager to assist him and secure the approvals from the clients. So after doing all the coordination, needless to say, the 30-day extension was accommodated. The customer was very happy, and now they have a very loyal current account, with a current account rather, and very grateful customer who was very happy that the company accommodated this. The second factor or intangible for our agents is that they stay with us because they know they're part of a great community. So when we have new hires graduating from training to production, we ask all the managers to personally welcome and congratulate these new hires so that our new agents get a glimpse of the bigger community they're joining, and we absolutely want them to feel welcome. So when they get into production, definitely there will be constant communication, huddles, updates, and real-time commendations done on the floor. Chat groups and chat forums are excellent tools as well, where agents know it's a safe space, there are no stupid questions, and then they can ask for tips and tricks on how to help how to help a customer with a difficult situation. And the last intangible for them is that they have to feel that they are heard. So similar to what Jaquie pointed out earlier. This statement is the reason why we invest so heavily in training our team leaders on how to coach and to take a genuine and sincere interest in the professional and personal lives of our agents. One best practice that we do is we gather our top performing agents across the board, and we ask them to join us in brainstorming sessions when we come up with process improvement projects for our programs. And these programs have been successful because we collaborated with the people who are going to need it the most. So ultimately, all of these practices put together reinforce the message that they are empowered, our agents are part of a family, part of a community, and that they are heard. So again, we take care of them, and in turn, they take care of our customers. Please allow me to show you a snapshot of a recent employee satisfaction survey that we took several months ago. Next slide, please. As you can see, the numbers speak for themselves. While we are not a perfect organization and we do have our challenges, this survey shows us that we're doing some things right, and they show that our employees feel that they are highly engaged and well supported. So that's it for me. Again, sorry for the technical glitches earlier. I hope you found the session rather to be productive. And I will give the floor back to Mr. Ali Antonio so that he can properly introduce our next guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Rissel. Please allow me to introduce our next speaker. He is a veteran of the telco industry, having spent over 20 years in Telstra, Australia. In 2009, he was expatriated to the Philippines to head and run Telstra's offshoring call center program. During his tenure, he was able to create over 15,000 jobs in the Philippines. Upon finishing his assignment, he opted to stay and found his calling in smart communications, where he headed customer care for 5 years. He has since branched out to PLDT Home and Enterprise, leading the contact center, customer experience, and churn management groups. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it from Mr. Ray Rivadelo.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Thanks for that, Ali. It's a great pleasure to be here today. What I want to do really is just share with you some of the experiences that I've had. In particular, I wanted to share with you some of the building blocks that I think are critical in building a CX organization. You know, there's no right or wrong in terms of building this, but these are basically the 5 key cogs in the wheel that I feel is important. The first one is really the mission, because the mission is critical because it defines a couple of things. It defines who you are, it defines your purpose, and it defines what really sets you apart from your competitors. The mission has to be clear and concise, and it has to be something that everyone can really rally against, all the way from your CEO and all the way down to your front line. The second thing is really the guiding principles, and the guiding principles is really what and how you want your company to operate. For us, it's always anchored on these 3 principles. The first is really around customer first. Customer first being putting the customer at the center of everything that we do. And it doesn't matter where you are or how you fit within the entire organization. It's really making sure that the customer-facing parts of the organization, as well as the support and back of house groups, are all aligned to making sure that it's always about the customer at the center. The second thing, and I'm really passionate about this, is that it has to be people-led. I firmly believe that we need to empower the front line, right? The front line are the ones that engage with our customers on a day-to-day basis. And ultimately, they represent our brand. Whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, they represent the brand, and we need to empower them. The third thing really is the mindset around resolution, because in customer service, in contact center operations, it's all about helping the customer, and it's all about fixing. So, our customers don't ring just to say hello. Essentially, it would be good, but they don't. The bulk of the reason why customers call, customers tweet, email, text, chat, or complain is because they've got a problem. So we really need to fix the problem. And once you've developed your mission and you've orchestrated the principles by which you want your organization to operate, you need to then define what are the key measures of success. And to be honest, there's so many metrics out there that you need to just find what makes sense for you. And so you really need to work out, again, what are the critical few that you want to provide a pressure test on how your organization is trending from a CX perspective. And my suggestion is that your metrics of success should be aligned with your guiding principles. So as an example, if your principle is around customer first, your KPIs and measures of success should be around things like resolution or resolution effectiveness, like FCR. You may want to have a measure that measures the transactional customer experience, because if you are managing the channels, it would be wise for you to actually get transactional surveys at every single interaction, because that will give you an immediate understanding of a couple of things, whether the experience was good from an agent perspective, whether the issue was resolved. And if the issue isn't resolved, you're able to then hijack that customer at that point of instance and try to recover them from a service perspective. And ultimately also in terms of customer, you really want to understand the demand failures in your organization as managed through complaints. And from my experience, I think complaints is a very good source of truth, and it will really tell you where you need to focus in your organization. The second thing is around people, and we've touched on employee surveys, which gives you a sort of health and well-being status of your workforce. But I think you should also measure the quality, output, and production of your workforce, not just so much on the traditional volume aspects of your workforce, but you need to make sure that the quality is there. And ultimately also attrition, because that ultimately defines to what extent people are staying and leaving in your organization. And normally from an operational perspective, the metrics I try to look at is a balanced approach. So you'd want to look at certain key measures of success that are anchored on operational efficiency, like service level, speed of answer, and the like, which is pretty standard. But also you want to understand the cost metrics, which is essentially understanding your cost to serve. What you want to do is improve your resolution rate at the front to reduce the downstream cost to serve for unresolved transactions that essentially move down the field. So as an example, working back in Telstra, hypothetically, it was a $5 call if it was resolved at the call center. But if it wasn't resolved and it had to be sent via a truck roll, it was like $150. So I think it's very critical to understand your cost points and your cost pressures and try to work out ways to actually deflect a lot of your transactions at the cheaper cost to serve. The third thing within the operations is a measure around time. So you're looking at traditional operations metrics, you're looking at cost, but also you need to look at time. Time in the sense of how long does it take to finish a job? What is the length of time for unresolved transactions versus what are the time that we can actually close transactions at first contact? So I think time is a critical aspect because you can sort of then determine the speed by which you need to improve your operations whilst balancing cost and quality as well. The fourth thing is really the priority setting. From my perspective, I like to break down the priorities into low-hanging fruit, medium, and long-term, which essentially then defines your end-to-end roadmap. The low-hanging fruit for me is basically the back to basics, the hygiene factors. If you're getting complaints from your customers that, it's hard to get in contact, so answer me, or when I do get in contact, you can't fix me, or when I get help, you're not helping me. These are the things that I think are very easy to fix, and there is an immediate uplift in your CSAT or CX results. The second tranche is really fixing what's broken, and that's really outside the space of your control, and you really need to navigate across the company to help rally them. So these are cross-functional teams, and you need to deploy because there are broken things upstream. For instance, it could be your go-to-market processes. It could be failures in your product and service design, which is forcing a lot of inbound traffic relating to faults, or it could be just systematic systems and processes that are not geared towards enabling the customer through the people. Another example is fixing where calls land and making sure that every single transaction is saved, because time and time again, there's a lot of abandonment that we need to manage, and not so much the metric, it's the people that roll up to that number is the critical factor. Simplification of tools and process. Often, and my experience is that the best people doing and defining the process and improving the process are the people actually doing the work, rather than the process people that are in the headquarters who have no idea of how things are being done. Lastly, the third part is the roadmap. What does good look like? Building for the future. This is where you start looking at, well, how do I create a universalist workforce that's agnostic to channel? How do I enable them? How do I deflect away from high cost to serve channels and into digital and self-serve? How do I create a single customer view of my customer so that I know that customer irrespective of where they land? And we touched upon this already, the new normal because of the pandemic. So the work from home, it's going to stay. So you need to start orchestrating in the future, past 2020, the fact that we will have a virtual workforce. And so you need to start working out, well, how do I best leverage this virtual workforce so that you can balance on-site as well as virtual. And lastly, it's very critical to have support from other parts of your organization, in particular the networks team, the products and marketing team. And lastly, I put here strategic footprint. And because this is a webinar, especially with people from Australia, I think strategically you need to make a determination of what makes sense to outsource versus what makes sense to stay in-sourced. As a rule of thumb, high complexity highly complex pieces of work that is core to your business, you may want to keep onshore. But highly repetitive and low cost and manual, they're the things that you should look to outsource, especially with partners like Inspiro. And when you look at the strategic footprint, you have to consider things like, well, how does this look like? How do I ensure continuity of service? What's my BCP footprint? And within my vendor footprint, how do I make sure that there's continuity? So you have to start thinking of site selection strategy. You have to start looking at core work that you want to in-source versus core work that you want to just outsource. So having said all that, I'll close by saying that I think it's safe to say that all of us are going through a CX journey or a CX transformation, and some of us have been well advanced or probably mature in their stage of transformation, and some are starting off. But it's also safe to say that there's no right or wrong, to be honest. This is not a magical, you use this slide and off you go. So each company and each business and each market is different. So you need to test and learn and work what things work for your business specifically and what things don't work for you. So I hope that was informative, and I look forward to questions later. So with that said, I'll hand over to Claire.
Great, wonderful, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm really conscious that we are quite a little way behind, so I'll try and be a bit punchy with my update team. I'll try and keep it to a relatively short space. For those of you who are unaware, Netregistry is part of a larger organisation owned by Web Central Group. Netregistry sells domain names, hosting, websites, all sorts of a variety of tools that enable small businesses to thrive online. And so my story starts on Monday, the 16th of March, and it was the last morning that I was going into the Sydney office for what would be up to 8 months. And as I arrived at 8 o'clock in the morning, the last thing I really expected was my ops supervisor from Inspiro in Manila to tell me that instead of the usual 80 plus people that were planned to show up to work, there were 5. We normally take 20,000 calls a month, 10,000 chats a month, and 10,000 tickets a month, and there were 5 people. No reflection at all on the team members. The Philippine government, in line with coronavirus restrictions, had shut down everything, and our team members were unable to attend work. And so the thing that really stuck out for me the most wasn't the fact that nobody could turn up for work. That happens, but it's how we responded to that and how we reacted to that. And phenomenally, we improved our CSAT during that time of COVID. When we went from, on the very first day, 5 people were able to work, and over the course of the next 2 to 4 to 6 weeks, more and more of our team members were set up and enabled to work from home. And that was all through pivoting and trying new things and sending out kit and sending out Wi-Fi, and giving our team members who had never experienced working from home the ability to be able to work from home. And so over the course of from March through April and through May, our team members became available to work online. But the telephony that we were using was old, and the telephony that we were using, that we had our contact center in Manila using, was so old that our team members working from home, it was just couldn't work from home. And so not only were we dealing with pandemic and team members unable to work, but also we couldn't take calls. And so as a major contact center, as I said, that takes 20,000 calls a month, for the months of April, May, and half of March, we didn't take a single call. So our response was to pivot, and our response was to be really open and communicative. We told all of our customers that we were impacted by coronavirus and that our contact center was impacted. We sent out proactive emails telling our customers, we can't take your phone call. That's just what it is. It's the fact. It's realistic. It's authentic. It's human. We are unable to take phone calls at the moment, but we are still here to help you. And we upskilled and changed our focus in our contact center.
And we seem to have a little bit of a technical difficulty. Don't we love technology when it decides not to be our friend? And she's back.
Where did you lose me, Fiona? I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Don't worry, Claire. Just keep marching.
Okay, we will. If I could just go into the next slide, what I really wanted to show you was really the proof of that pudding. If we look at the pre-pandemic, which is the December, January, February, March, this is our chat CSAT for our contact center. Now, all of our chat is handled by our partners in Inspiro out of Manila, and our customers love it. That's 92% satisfied with the service that we receive via chat. And even in March, when we were unable to have many people available to take our contacts, it still remained high at 92. And in the month of April, when all of our countries were probably in one of the most lockdown, it actually went up to 94.8. And so the idea, and what Jaquie was saying before around emotional labor and really leading in, our team members told customers that they were working from home, that this was a new experience for them, that they'd been affected by the pandemic, and our customers understood. In fact, our customers, the commentary that we got back in our CSAT open commentary was that they appreciated the openness and the authenticity and the honesty of our contact center team members, our customer care representatives. And so in summary, although the crisis had a lot of negative impacts, in some regards, I think it's a bit of a crisis that we had to have in order to bring humility and authenticity and human connectedness back into some of our contact centers. And so we will never be the same from now, and neither will our teams and the way that we interact with our customers. And really leaning into it with that emotional labor, that hearts and mind is just absolutely critical. And I'll stop there for today, and I will hand back over to Fiona. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire, and thank you for working through the technology challenges that seem to be our not friendly partner today, as opposed to Inspiro. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A, but while the Q&A is going on, we're going to have a poll running because we want you to do some more work. And I'm not going to read the questions. Remember that you need to ask a question or write a comment if you're going to go into the draw to receive one of Jaquie's 20 signed copies of her books in her service series. So one of the questions that we have, and I think it's a really important one, I might ask Jaquie this one because I think it kind of brings the whole webinar together for me, because we're talking about people, we're talking about technology. And Jaquie, you spoke about the culture of winning customer experience operations. What role and to what extent, in your opinion, does technology play?
Oh, haven't we learned this year that it needs to be our friend? But I loved, how Claire articulated so well that when technology fails us, we find another way. And I think the key part to it is that we find a way that is authentic, that's human, and we be transparent about it. Like, hasn't the world become more forgiving this year? Like, we're more patient, we're more forgiving, and we understand that stuff happens. So I think being really honest and saying, that sometimes technology doesn't support us, and letting people know that we're doing the best we can with what we've got. And keep reminding them some of those fundamentals. Remember those fundamentals of, I'm here to listen, I'm here to hear you, I'm here to understand your challenges, and I'll do that the best way I can. And I think if we just keep remembering some of those guiding principles, we can navigate through any tech problems. What a great question, Fiona.
Thanks, Jaquie. And I've got another one for Claire. So we're going to hear from you again. So this, and I think because Ray very much covered it off. So Claire, from your perspective, what were your top 3 considerations to outsource?
So we've actually had an ongoing relationship with Inspiro for many, many, many years. Sorry, there is really bad noise in the background. Fiona, do you want to come back to that question in a couple of minutes? Sorry.
We're nearly at the end of the webinar though, Claire. That's the only challenge, so we might not be able to come back to it. So let's go to either Ali or Rochelle. How does Inspiro ensure that service levels and customer experience do not get impacted during and after transition? I don't know who wants to take that one.
I'll take that, Fiona.
Thanks, Ali.
I think part of it, I think in the beginning, it's extremely critical that you do scoping properly, that you work with the client, ask the right questions, so that you have the right metrics to measure. The second leg of it, I think, is the hand-holding phase. And I talked about it earlier. We do have a dedicated Tiger team that are experts in their industry. So these guys will challenge the customer properly, ask the right questions so that we get the corresponding output that we look for. I hope that answers the question.
Fantastic. Now, Claire, do you still sound like you're in a dentist chair? Oh, you do. Okay. Well, all right. So we have more questions, so we can keep asking. All good. Okay. So Emma has asked a question for, I think it's going to be Ray in this case. What was the challenging for managing remote team members, especially around feeling connected to their teammates?
Yeah, so one, you needed to make sure that you were always consistently checking up on them. You want to make sure you're still connected, even though they're working from home. And you also need to be persistent, and you just need to take care of them, because working from home, it's not like, it's not like in Australia where the connection is relatively okay or they've got the right tools at home. So again, it's all about that empowerment, and it takes a while to actually get them up to speed, meaning that at the time that we actually configured the organization so that we started to push more virtually, we did it gradually until such time that they were ready, both emotionally and professionally. And then once we were able to get over that hurdle, we started putting more work there. But one thing that was really good was that we had team leaders in Rochelle's organization that we actually started creating virtual dashboards so that we can actually see not just their performance, but what made sense. And the other thing that we did was we still continued to use the on-site team predominantly during our peak hours, so that work from home, we tended to use them more for back office work or for graveyard, where it wasn't so much a real-time need to actually pick up the phone, so they can do back office work. Hope that was.
Thanks, Ray. We're nearly at the hour, so keep those questions coming in, because if they don't get answered while we're live, they will get answered after the webinar. I can absolutely promise you that. Jaquie, we had you down for a recap and some closing remarks. How about we put you on the spot for that?
Yeah, look, I think what I've really picked up today from all the panelists and sort of the underlying theme is that head and heart is not just for our customers, but it's for our teams as well, so thinking about, how we create a connection with our employees, that internal customer interaction that happens, and knowing that when we take care of our people, we take care of our customers. And I think that's what's been evident in the Inspiro conversation today with Rochelle and some other examples. And I really loved the measurement piece that Ray brought to the conversation too, but again, measuring all of it, not just key hard metrics that are, about logic and systems and numbers, but also metrics around how people feel and employees, including customers. So I think if there was one word that over sort of arches this message today, is that everything's a balance, right? Everything's a balance in life. And if we're a little bit out of balance, then it has an impact on the people that we're serving. So take care of your people and they'll take care of your customers, and make sure that when we're applying metrics to how well we're going, how well we're performing, make sure that we are creatures of emotions. So we need metrics to show us how people feel and how they're behaving. that would probably be my closing remarks, Fiona. I hope I've spoken eloquently enough for all the panelists today. It was a fantastic, informative session.
Thanks, Jaquie. And any further remarks from Ray or Russell or Ali at this point? I'm Claire, as long as she's not still in the dentist chair. No, you guys.
No, nothing for me other than that. What I said before. I mean, it's a learning curve, right? All of us are going through this journey, right? And so we need to just sort of support each other as we go through. There's no right or wrong, you know. So you need to pick up pieces that make sense for you individually as well as for your organization and people.
Thanks, Ray. Well, with that, thanks to everybody who joined us today on the webinar. Thanks to our fabulous panel who shared that they are balanced between their heart and their head, that they have emotional fitness through being socially intelligent, and that they are present and mindful. And remember, measure the right things. With that, have a wonderful silly season, as I love to call it. Be safe. Have a fantastic time with your families. Thank you to Inspiro and to Jaquie Scammell in particular for joining us today. And have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you might be. And we'll see you next time.